We're going to look at some hip extension. So hip extension is required for walking, to open the front hip and pull the leg back through the back of the leg, hamstrings, glutes. And we're going to add a little bit of rotation in the upper body and extension. So we're just going to start with 2 arms forward, head down. You can leave your head down. And I want you to wiggle and just try and place the pubic bone heavily into the mat and feel that the sacrum could just center straight down on top of that pubic bone. So I'm not in a tuck and I'm not in an arch. I'm just fairly neutral, trying to just increase the weight through this whole exercise of that sacrum pubic bone to help ground my pelvis ready for moving my legs. So we're going to keep the head down, reach one leg out, ground the sacrum, ground the pubic bone, and just let one thigh hover off the floor and back down, and then the other leg. So before it picks up, you feel the sacrum drop onto the pubic bone into the mat, and you hover the leg. If you would like to, you could hover your sternum up a little bit and try this in a tiny little back bend. So keeping my low ribs down and tucked into the opposite hip, and I'm just hovering a leg and hovering a leg. And as I'm doing this, I'm starting to open out in the pelvis and connect the front ribs down towards the hips. So I feel like I'm starting to sort of ground my upper body into the mat, and I'm starting to ground my pelvis into the mat. Doesn't matter how big the lift of the legs are, they could be small. And then we're just going to try a little bit extension. So start with your forehead down, your nose comes forward, and you're going to use your arms to start to lift your back up. Shouldn't be any work in the back. You can explore how high you want to go there. Make sure you can feel the front ribs supporting the back and coming down. And I want you to start trying to get even work around the trunk. So as you come up, we're working the back, the sides and the front body equally, as though your spine can just be suspended in the center, supported by the front, the back and the sides. And now you're starting to use less arms to get you up, but more sense of that whole 360-degree circumference of support around the spine. And I want you to just do 2 more, and I want you to imagine that you're growing from that base of the pubic bone heavy, the sacrum dropping, and then you're growing your spine forward and up. So we're actually getting longer and taller with support through the front, the back, the sides. Not too much work, just enough. As little as necessary. And hopefully you're starting to feel a little more grounded through your base of your pelvis now. Open through the front of your hips. And we're going to add on a little bit. So we're going to come up. Actually, let's start with the right hand by your hip, palm up. So we've got a one-handed support, but it's very light on the arm. And floating that long one by the leg and the hip up off the floor. And you're going to float the opposite leg. So I've got let's come back down. I've got my left arm forward. So I'm going to float my left leg, right arm, and coming back down. Let's take 2 arms in front, and I want you to just try that movement with the 2 hands on the floor. Stay up and just lift a leg and then the other leg. And notice how when you lift the left leg, your left hand feels heavy, and when you lift your right leg, your right hand feels heavy. So it's this opposite. My right leg is heavy, my left hand is heavy, and it feels like my opposite light left lifted leg wants to pair with a lifted right arm. So we've got this diagonal base of support and diagonal challenge of lift. So you could try a few with the opposite arm, opposite leg. Careful you're not working your back. Stay as low as you need. Can you work the front as much as the sides, as much as the back? And then come back with that right hand palm up. And if we go back to our, I think then it makes sense why we're lifting that left leg. Right arm. And we're stabilizing with the left hand, left leg. So this time I'm going to turn and look to my back hand. So I've got rotation, extension, hip extension, and back down. Coming up and turning to look at it. You don't need to go high, but I'm hoping you're feeling like you're opening through the front of your left hip. Lengthening in the spine, lengthening and rotating. Let's swap the arms. So floating, left hand, right leg. And coming back down. Finding the front as much as the back and the sides, and not overworking in the front there. So it's subtle, responsive, light. Last one. Oh, I forgot to turn. We better do 3 turnings. So we're turning to the back hand and coming back down. Lifting, hand, foot, turning to look at that lifted hand. You're probably not going to see it, but just drawing. And last one, careful you stay low, contained through the front wall of your tummy. And rest. And then we're going to just sit back. Actually, we're going to do one more challenge here. So I've just got my elbows wide and my fingers pointing into each other. I've got my knees out a little bit and my heels in towards me. So my feet are in a little V, heels together, toes apart. And I'm going to think of staying low, tucking ribs in and back, and finding that sacrum falling to the pubic bone, falling to the floor. And then I'm hovering my thighs up and back down. And all you really want to feel is a little bit of work through the back of the thighs, the low glutes. Nothing in the low back. If you're feeling that low back, you're not lifting yet, you need to just work on the anchoring of the sacrum pubic bone. I'm barely lifting here. Some of you may be flying up. Just careful you're not arching your low back. And then we're going to play. So with that up hover, I'm going to try and just lift a hip and back down, and lift the other hip and back down. Now to begin with, it can feel a little like, oh my goodness, I don't even know how to do that, which is great because it just tells you that there's not a neural pattern in your brain to body for that yet. So make sure it's coming from not your back, but your leg to hip to glutes. Leg to hip to glutes. So I have to feel one side of my glute hamstring work right up around the sit bone. And then once you get that, follow that, and you might want to make it a little bigger. Careful it doesn't become a back thing though. It's got to stay the work in that pelvis. And very nice mobilizing opening exercise. Take your hands under your shoulders, sit back into a bit of a child's pose here, or a rest position. Five deep breaths. And then we're going to tuck your toes under, and we're going to do a little hinging. So keeping your tail lifted as you sit back and forward. And then trying that in a round back. So coming back with my round. And I'm feeling a lovely stretch in that back. Still hinging in the hip, but it's quite a different experience. They're both good. Back to your neutral, so lifting the tail, different challenges. And then round back. And then we're going to just try a hover. So we're going to draw the belly in and up like you're putting a belt on through the front hips. And you're just going to hover and hold for 3 breaths. If you can't keep your tummy drawn in, you're not quite ready for that one, you might just start with little up and down hovers. Come to the round shape. Can we keep the same idea, tummy pulling in? You're going to press out with the hands, push away, draw the navel in and hover the knees for 3, 2, 1 and come back down. And then we're going to play with that with your roller for a little bit of challenge. So I'm going to take your knees up onto your roller, or really my shins, and I'm going to lift tail, so I'm in my neutral position, and I'm just going to explore that hinging in and out, trying not to round in my low back, which is the challenge. Lift the knees to pull them in, and then try it in a round shape. So curl the tail between the legs, pulling in, pressing out. Like you're pulling your knees in from the zip up of your tummy. And rest.